successfully weathered the economic fallout of the recent Gulf conflict that temporarily disrupted shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, avoiding a potential fuel crisis and macroeconomic instability through a combination of calibrated policy measures and favorable global developments, Chief Economic Advisor V. Anantha Nageshwaran has said. Nageshwaran reflected on the country's response to the conflict and wrote that despite fears of an oil shock, supply disruptions and a balance of payment crisis, India managed to maintain uninterrupted fuel supplies, stable domestic prices and overall macroeconomic stability. According to the CEA viewers, the government's priority during the crisis was to shield households from supply shortages and price shocks. Although the import-linked cost of a standard LPG cylinder crossed rupees 1,600, the retail price for consumers was kept close to rupees 900, with even lower prices for poorer households. Commercial and bulk users were asked to reduce consumption to ensure uninterrupted household supplies. Beyond price support, India strengthened energy security by rapidly increasing domestic cooking gas production and diversifying import sources. India, he noted, was among the few countries that managed to keep cargo movements uninterrupted, even as shipping through the Strait of Hormuz fell sharply. Atul Ranjan is joining me with the latest updates on this. What can you tell us, Atul?
Well, essentially, Prime Minister Modi has shared the article of Anantha Nageshwaran, the Chief Economic Advisor of the government, who in a piece has recently praised the Indian government for management of the entire West Asian crisis when it comes to particularly, the oil and natural gas supplies. What essentially Nageshwaran argues in his article is that, despite being a country that imports ninth of the 10th of its need, despite the crisis, it managed to, kind of steer out smoothly of the whole situation. What it mentioned was that, what it was forecasted that, the petrol pumps would run dry, gases would run out of, LPG cylinders. All of that doom predictions, did not come true for India, despite, the crisis, looming for about 3 to 4 months, is what Nageshwaran has argued. Now, the credit that Nageshwaran obviously gives is to the government for managing throughout the crisis, dealing with the different nations and managing to get supplies at least to a level where the kind of predictions that was initially done for India as well as for several other South Asian nations. That sort of crisis we did not see. At the same time, Nageshwaran also mentioned that the kind of crisis that we saw in other Southeast Asian countries as well was something which was avoided by the government, by the insurers. In short, that sort of scenario was avoided in India by the government through its meticulous planning as well as the structural, the inherent the strength of the Indian economy and the trade practices that India has adopted over the years. Is that what is Nageshwaran has mentioned in his article, and that has been shared by Prime Minister Modi, where Prime Minister Modi also comments and sort of praises his government for kind of smoothly maneuvering and navigating through the entire crisis because of their partnership with different nations as well as a variety in trade and investments that India has approached for the last few years. That has been reiterated by Nageshwaran as well as Prime Minister Modi.
All right, Atul, thanks for joining me. And I now have Dr. Sharad Kohli. He's a senior economist who's joining me on the broadcast. Dr. Kohli, welcome. And the chief economic advisor said that India successfully weathered the Gulf conflict without a fuel crisis. How significant is this achievement from a macroeconomic standpoint?
Good evening, Vaishali, to you and the viewers. I think we need to look at this on relative terms because we all know India did go through a bit of a tough time in terms of LPG cylinders, their supply, then 7.5 rupees of petrol and diesel hike and all that. But this needs to be seen in spirit, because if you compare it with some of the so-called developed world, better part of Europe and America, Australia and many other countries, where the energy prices had to be shot up, much earlier and much more. Well, India managed to wither away that for first 76 days, there was no hike. Then the hike came in a staggered form. And more importantly, our supplies were not disturbed. We managed to source from 40 plus countries, different sources. considering that almost 9/10 of our crude requirements are imported, I think we've handled it very well. So you need to look at the whole article with a perspective on relative terms. We are hit by inflation as well. We can't deny that. So I would say that I think it's the resilience of Indian economy because we are a consumption-driven story. About 60% of our economy comprises of consumption when me and you go and purchase goods and services. I think that's what makes India resilient, and we are not as dependent on the international community as probably economies like China, South Korea, Japan are. So we are quite self-dependent that way, but I think that's what made us winner, and I think we'll be back on growth path now with the crude oil prices down to $72, $73. We're almost heading to the same levels as we were before the war. So hopefully whatever damage has been done by way of inflation and the cascading effect of diesel price hikes, I think we should be back to the same level very, very soon. I have a feeling that the quarter, July, September, we'll see reversal of some of the adverse, economic parameters that we have seen emanating because of this crisis.
Right, Dr. Kohli, I'll come back to you. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, viewers, has said that India had demonstrated, and I quote, remarkable stability during challenging global conditions, attributing it to a decade of macroeconomic stability and responsive policy making. His remarks came after Chief Economic Advisor V. Anantha Nageshwaran wrote that India had successfully navigated the economic fallout of the recent Gulf conflict, which temporarily disrupted shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, without facing a fuel crisis or macroeconomic instability. And Dr. Kohli, I'm coming back to you. Now, the current situation, when you look at the war, isn't completely sorted. There is stuff happening, and are we really headed towards peace is the question, or maybe not, considering Donald Trump and Iran, who are currently also at loggerheads. My question to you is that if another geopolitical crisis were to disrupt global energy markets tomorrow, is India better prepared today than it was 5 or 10 years ago?
I'm sure, Vaishali, we've learned our lessons. These last 3.5 months have taught us a lot. And we have diversified the energy resources, as you're aware. We have also, managed to create better petroleum reserves than before. I think they'll be further augmented in the weeks to come, months to come. They'll be far better because there's a lot of time comparison done with the Chinese reserves and our reserves. Obviously, we didn't anticipate the crisis as much as it grew into. But then, yes, we are now better prepared. We've learned our lessons. I think the focus on renewable energy, green energy, the focus on solar, EVs, I think that focus will now be enhanced, ethanol and so on and so forth. And I hope, if this crisis were to come again, well, with President Trump and Iran, you never know, because even after signing of the truce, we heard aggression from both ends. So it's a very delicate situation as of now. But I'm sure it will allow us some time to probably take alternate course of action. I'm sure government is going to press the accelerator on the plans for alternate energy, green energy and renewable energy in the times to come sooner than what we would have envisaged in a situation before this particular incident happened, Vaishali.
Always a pleasure speaking to you, Dr. Kohli. Thank you so much for joining me. And with that, viewers, it's a wrap from me. Thank you for your time and your trust, and stay tuned to NewsX because there's a lot more coming up on the other side of this short commercial break.